So, the place I'd like to start, I think primarily, is gear and unique choices, and then working our way into gems, and then passive discussion and various merits on that. So, the primary thing that the build requires, obviously, is Aura Sacrifice. So, we're sitting on a 724 DPS Aura Sacrifice sword. It's got great minimum damage. The maximum damage is alright, could be better. Pretty low attack speed roll. Ideally, you'd want a higher roll. 750 is, I think, the highest damage auros I've managed to get my hands on in the beta so far. And it's not a huge difference, honestly. I've run with a 690, this one a 724, 750, and a few in between. And the difference between 690 and 750 was not that substantial. It's definitely helpful, but you don't need a perfectly rolled or even a very well rolled to make this build work. So the Aura Sacrifice gives a 20% chance to ignite, which is how you're going to make this build work. You gain a Frenzy Charge if an attack ignites an enemy, and so Ignite Chance, as I said previously, is king up to a certain point because it's absolutely required to get the Frenzy Charges going, and Frenzy Charges are a huge offensive and defensive uh, boon to the build. So the way you help generate Frenzy Charges is the build itself is going to give you 15% off the tree, with the potential of getting another 15% if you feel it's necessary. 10% rather easily, 3% or 5%, a little inefficient in my opinion, but entirely optional if you want it. And so you're going to be sitting at 35% chance with just Oros and the tree. Now I've run with 35% before on a few iterations of this build, and it's fairly consistent, but you're probably going to run out here and there. And the, I think, biggest killer of this build is flickering into a pack and running out. I don't think there's anything more dangerous for this build in particular than flickering in and stopping. You need to keep moving, and the more frenzy charges you have, the faster this occurs, so you want to keep consistently high frenzy charges. At the same time, once you start being able to do that, ignite chance is worthless to you. So it's definitely a rather interesting balance. You don't just want to stack as much ignite chance as you can because it's only going to be useful up to a certain point. And from my testing, I feel like 55% is about where you want to be for consistent frenzy charge generation that doesn't suffer from diminishing returns. So currently I'm sitting at 45% ignite chance, and the way I've achieved that is with the interaction of Oros, 15% off the passive tree, and a perfectly rolled ignite chance Moku's. Uh, it's perfect rolled fire cold, but that's irrelevant. The fire damage is kind of low, but once again, that's not a huge deal. You really just want it for the ignite chance. And the reses on it are nice, and the fact that it gives reses make it, a more viable option, not just a completely wasted slot. And it'll save you 4 passive points in the long run if you can swing it. So the interaction between the Mokus, the Oros, and the passive tree is what's going to get us our Ignite chance and keep the build rolling. The next unique I want to talk about is the Darkrai Vector Boots. Now originally I didn't feel like this unique was that necessary to the build. Primarily because with the Frenzy Charge Mania that's basically occurred in beta, anything relating to Frenzy Charges has become significantly more expensive because basically every single build wants Frenzy Charges. The fact that they give 4% more damage per Frenzy Charge now, including attack speed and cast speed, it just makes it too attractive of an option if you can swing it to get Frenzy Charges. Something that gives you an additional Frenzy Charge is nice, as well as giving you additional benefits to Frenzy Charges, i.e. the movement speed and the dodge chance make it, much more attractive. Meaning that your frenzy charges become offensive and defensive buffs that you want to maintain constantly, and you get a free frenzy charge on top of that. The 50% reduced frenzy charge duration is definitely a little bit annoying, as we saw on that Dried Lakes run. If I didn't hit a pack, I would only have about 7 seconds to generate more frenzy charges, and if I ran out, then the climb from 0 to 7 definitely wasn't instant. At 45%, it's a climb. It absolutely is. Over a few packs, you're probably going to hit 7, but it's going to take several. And that's one of the arguments for stacking more Ignite chance than this build currently has. But like I said, I feel like the breakpoint occurs around 55-60%, and after that point you're better off going with other stats. So those are the primary unique interactions. One thing that I do not have that I believe would give you the 55% fairly consistently and save you passive points in the long run is a Doriani's Catalyst, or not Catalyst, sorry, Invitation, Doriani's Invitation, the Fire Belt. The reason that's going to be so useful is it's going to give you increased fire damage, which is nice, dual reses, which is solid, life leech as fire damage, which at 0.2% isn't as strong as it used to be, obviously. I mean, with the changes to Leech in general, you could argue that Leech is in a, a worse place for the most part. I don't really know where you're going to come out on that argument. For some people, it was completely reasonable. Other people are incredibly disappointed. I think the general consensus is that it's weaker in general. Stronger against multiple targets, but it's usually not where a lot of people, I think, felt like they really needed their Leech. So with that belt, you also get 10% chance to ignite during flask duration, which means that, if you're keeping your defensive flasks up or an Adsirity flask or whatever fairly consistently, you're going to have an additional 10% bumping you in this build up to 55%, which is about the break point that I believe the build would like to have. Another potential option for a unique is the Diadian Dawn belt that was added. It gives a fair amount of life, good dual res, and 0.6% of attack damage leech against chilled enemies. And with our Herald of Ice, and maybe potentially some added cold damage on gear and all the elemental damage benefits we get from the build, chilling is a fairly reasonable option that you could be doing consistently that could potentially make the Diadian Dawn a very strong leveling option, but I believe Doriani's, due to the Ignite chance, would probably win out in the end. So, the last unique interaction that I have explored and have found ultimately wanting is that the Moku's embrace synergy with Cloak of Flames. Now, people have done this before, and the basic premise is Moku's embrace gives plus 25% chance to be ignited. You get to 50%. You run a Cloak of Flames, 20% of the physical damage you will take is converted to fire damage, meaning that you will be able to consistently take fire damage and thus consistently be ignited, giving you a fairly consistent 40% increased attack speed. This is nice in theory. The problems with it are, I think, more due to this build than the actual interaction. So if you can swing it on this build, you really want weapon elemental damage. This is kind of a crappy ring, but it rolled really good elemental damage, so I'm running with it currently. And that's going to be, in my opinion, quite a bit more useful than the somewhat inconsistent nature of the attack speed. The fact that you are also getting acrobatics in this build for 40% dodge chance, you're running 7 frenzy charges somewhat consistently, giving you, with the dark ray vectors, an additional 14% dodge chance, and hopefully, a decent amount of evasion as well. You're not going to be hit a whole lot, which means that igniting yourself is not going to be consistent. The 40% will not be consistent, and you're giving up 2 rings, which is, a potentially large amount of damage / defensive options, as well as a chest piece, which if you're relying on that for your 5-link, which most people who aren't rich are, you're going to not be able to roll 4 reds and a green reasonably on a Cloak of Flames. You could do it on an Aura Sacrifice, but once again, a 5-link Aura Sacrifice is going to run you quite a bit more than, just an Aura Sacrifice. So, for the sake of cost and reasonability, we're going to assume that you're going to try and go for the more cost-effective options, which is, an armor / armor evasion 5-link, which is pretty easy to get your hands on, and a non-linked Aura Sacrifice that you don't really care about the gems on there. So assuming all of that, the Cloak of Flames Moku's interaction isn't really a great option. If you ran a different iteration of this build, potentially without acrobatics, it wouldn't probably be as unreasonable, but you still want Dark Ray vectors, and so you're getting that dodge chance. And so ultimately I feel like it's just not the best option out there. So I feel like that covers all of the unique interactions that at least I've thought of. You know, feel free to throw any ideas if you have them out there, but I feel like those are at least all of the reasonable options. Like, I could think of Hrimnor's Resolve, for instance, the additional fire damage helm. I mean, it's not really worth it to me. 30 to 40% increased fire damage is nice, sure, but I mean, it's not that great, and you're giving up health and potentially reses on there, and in this particular instance, I really need my helm to be providing that, so I feel like that's pretty much all the uniques we can, reasonably discuss